son called me the week before Thanksgiving to say he was bringing someone home. That wasn't unusual. He was 31, lived 2 states away in Nashville, and brought people home maybe once every 2 or 3 years. What was unusual was how he said it. He didn't say, "I'm seeing someone." He said, "Dad, I think she might be the one." I didn't press him on the phone. He sounded happy in a way I hadn't heard since before the divorce. His divorce, 4 years back, the kind that leaves a man quiet for a long time. So I just said, "Good, I'll make the turkey." Her name was Vivian. She was 34, originally from Charlotte, worked in something called wealth optimization consulting, which she explained over the phone. My son had her call me the Sunday before the trip, as helping high net worth individuals restructure their portfolios for long-term security. I didn't ask many questions. I was a high school history teacher for 26 years. I know nothing about wealth optimization. I know about the Missouri Compromise and how to make my late wife's stuffing recipe without measuring anything. My daughter flew in from Portland the day before. She always comes early. She likes to help with the cooking, and honestly, I think she just likes having the house to herself for a few hours before it fills up. She's 35, 2 years older than my son, and she has always been the one who notices things. Even as a kid, she would notice when I was tired before I knew I was tired. She'd notice when her brother was lying before he finished the sentence. We had a signal, her and I. We started it when she was about 10 or 11, right around the time my wife got sick the first time, and everything in the house became a little unpredictable. The signal was simple. If she pressed her thumb into her palm twice, like making a half fist, twice, visible to me, but not obvious to anyone else, it meant something's wrong and I need you to pay attention. We never used it in a crisis. We used it once when a neighbor was drunk at a birthday party and getting loud. We used it once when she was 16 and a boy at a school dance wouldn't leave her alone. Small things, but it was ours, and we never talked about retiring it. Vivienne and my son arrived Wednesday evening. She walked into my house with a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir and a small bouquet of sunflowers, not roses, not lilies, sunflowers, and said, "I've been looking forward to this all month." She smiled at my daughter like they were already friends. She complimented the house in a way that felt personal, like she'd been listening when my son described it. I liked her immediately. That's the honest truth. She was warm and funny, and she helped clear the table without being asked. She asked my daughter about her work in a way that seemed genuinely curious. She found the one framed photo of my wife in the hallway and stood in front of it for a moment and said softly, "She looks kind." I had to clear my throat and move back toward the kitchen. Thanksgiving dinner was loud in a good way. My brother and his wife came, and my daughter's friend who lives nearby and had nowhere else to go. 8 people around a table built for 6. Vivienne fit in without trying. She was easy to talk to, and she didn't perform. That was the thing I kept noticing. Some people, when they're meeting the family for the first time, they perform. They're always a little too present, a little too eager. Vivienne just sat there and participated like she belonged. My son kept looking at her the way a man looks at someone he can't believe is real. After dinner, we moved to the living room. My brother put on a football game nobody really watched. Vivienne asked me about teaching, about the years I'd done it, what I missed. We talked for maybe 20 minutes, just the 2 of us in the corner of the room, while my son argued with my brother about the game. She asked if I'd ever thought about the financial transition into retirement. Not in a selling way, just as a question, as part of the conversation. I said I had a pension and Social Security, and that was mostly it. She nodded. She didn't push. I didn't think anything of it. It was later, after my brother and his wife left, after my daughter's friend left, when we were all sitting around the kitchen island with wine and the last of the pie, that I saw it. My son had been telling a story, something about a work trip, a delayed flight, a hotel that had given away his room, and my daughter was laughing, and I happened to look at her hand, resting on the counter, and she pressed her thumb into her palm. Once. Then, twice. She didn't look at me. She was still smiling at her brother's story. But her hand did it again. 1, 2. I felt something shift in my chest. I looked at Vivienne. She was laughing too. Her head tilted toward my son, her hand on his arm. Nothing visible, nothing to point at, just my daughter's thumb in her palm and 25 years of knowing what it meant. I didn't say anything. I laughed at the right moments and refilled glasses and let the evening wind down naturally. Vivienne and my son took the guest room. My daughter took her old room. I lay in bed for 2 hours thinking about nothing specific, just a low current of something I couldn't name. The next morning, I got up early and made coffee and waited. My daughter came downstairs before anyone else. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and wrapped her hands around her mug and said, "I need to tell you something." She'd been up late looking at her phone. She said she hadn't planned to. She'd just started with a name, then a company, then the company's registration, then some forum posts. She said she almost convinced herself she was being paranoid. Then she found the third thing, and she stopped convincing herself. Vivienne's company, the Wealth Optimization Consulting, wasn't registered with FINRA. Not unusual on its own, she said, depending on what services they offered. But the business address was a mailbox service in Charlotte. The company had been incorporated 18 months ago. Before that, Vivienne had worked for a different firm. My daughter found a LinkedIn that had since been scrubbed. Also in wealth consulting, also in Charlotte, that had been the subject of a complaint filed with the North Carolina Attorney General's office. The complaint was about solicitation of elderly clients, unsolicited contact, high-pressure tactics. The firm had settled, changed its name, and 2 of the 3 principals, one of whom had the same first name as a reference listed on Vivienne's professional website, had moved on. My daughter put her phone face down on the table. She said, "I might be wrong. I hope I'm wrong." I sat with that for a while. I told her I was glad she told me. I told her we weren't going to do anything yet. I told her to act normal. That afternoon, I called a former colleague of mine, a man I taught alongside for 12 years before he retired and went into financial advisory work. I described the firm, the Charlotte connection, the FINRA gap. He said he'd make some calls. He got back to me by evening. He confirmed the parent company behind Vivienne's firm had a paper trail. Not criminal, not yet, but the kind of paper trail that follows a certain type of operation. The model was simple. Identify a target, usually someone older, usually someone with a pension or a fixed income or a house paid off, build a relationship, build trust, propose an investment, move the money into vehicles that were very hard to unwind quickly. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the first transfer was already 3 layers deep. He said, "Does she know what you did for 30 years? I said, "I taught history." He said, "Does she know that?" I thought about Thanksgiving dinner, about Vivienne asking what I missed about teaching, about the 20-minute conversation, about her asking, gently, if I'd thought about the financial transition into retirement. I said I didn't think she knew I was a teacher. He said, "Find out how she found your son." I didn't sleep well that night either. On Saturday morning, while Vivienne was in the shower and my son was making eggs, I sat next to him at the counter and I asked him, casually, like a father making conversation, how he and Vivienne had met. He smiled and told me the story. They'd met at a networking event in Nashville in October, 2 months before. She'd been there with a client, she'd said. They'd gotten to talking. He'd asked for her number. I asked him if she'd known before they met that he was from Indiana, that his family was here. He thought about it. He said he thought he'd mentioned it pretty early. He said he might have mentioned at some point that I was retired. He wasn't sure when. I said, "Did she ever ask about me? About what I did before I retired?" He looked at me a little funny. He said, "Not really. She might have asked the general stuff." "Why?" I said. "No reason. Eggs smell good." My daughter caught my eye across the kitchen. I spent Saturday afternoon on my laptop in the study. Door closed. I have a small investment account. Not large, but real. through a local credit union that my wife and I opened together in 2003. I have the pension. I have some savings bonds I bought years ago that I keep forgetting are in the fireproof box in the closet. I am not a wealthy man by any standard. But to someone looking from the outside, retired, house paid off, mentions of a pension, I must have looked like something worth investigating. I found 2 more things by dinner. The first was a lawsuit filed and settled in South Carolina in 2019 involving a company with a nearly identical structure to Vivienne's. The plaintiff was a 71-year-old retired nurse. She had transferred $62,000 into an annuity product that turned out to have surrender charges so steep that accessing her own money within 10 years would cost her more than half of it. The person who had sold her the product was listed in the filing. The name was different from Vivienne's, but the structure, the personal relationship built first, the gentle questions about retirement finances, the gradual introduction of a product was the same playbook, paragraph by paragraph. The second thing was a post on a fraud awareness forum, posted 14 months ago by a user whose username I couldn't connect to a real name. The post described a woman matching Vivienne's description. Same first name, same city, same general approach, who had gotten close to the adult son of a retired couple in Georgia. The son had introduced her to his parents. The parents had been approached about a retirement income product. One of them had transferred money before the son found out and ended things. The post said the son had reported to the state AG's office. There was no follow-up response saying anything had been done. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a few minutes. I want to be careful here because I had spent 2 days now building a case in my own head, and my daughter was the one who'd started it. And there's a version of this where 2 worried people talk themselves into seeing a monster, and an innocent woman's life gets worse because of it. I held that possibility the whole weekend. I kept looking for the explanation that made it fine. I couldn't find one. At dinner that night, I watched Vivienne. I watched how she talked to my son. It seemed real. That was the hardest part. Whatever she felt for him, I couldn't be sure it was nothing. People are complicated. I had no way to know if she had started this as an operation and somewhere along the way something had shifted, or if the warmth was entirely performance. What I knew was the structure. What I knew was the pattern. What I knew was that my son did not know what I knew, and she had already asked me about my retirement finances once, and she was going to ask again. I decided to ask her first. Sunday morning. My son was in the shower. My daughter was at the kitchen table with coffee. Vivienne came down in a sweater and socks, easy and comfortable, and I told her I'd been thinking about what she'd said at Thanksgiving, about the transition into retirement, and I said I had some questions if she didn't mind. She smiled. She said, of course. She sat down. I asked her about her firm, the name of it, the registration. She explained it the same way she had on the phone. Wealth optimization, high net worth clients, the industry language flowing easily. I asked which regulatory body they filed with. She said they were structured to work under exemptions that didn't require FINRA registration. I asked about the Charlotte address. She gave me the name of the business center. I told her I'd looked it up. I told her what I'd found. I told her what I'd found. I told her about the lawsuit in South Carolina. I told her about the forum post. She didn't flinch the way I expected. She sat very still for a moment, and then she said, "You've been doing research." I said, "Yes." She said, "How long?" I said, "Since Friday morning." She looked at the table. I wasn't sure what was coming. Part of me was still waiting for her to explain it all, to have a reason for every piece of it, to make me feel like the paranoid father who'd ruined something good. She said, "Does he know?" I said no. She said, "I need to talk to him." I said I thought she should. My daughter got up from the table without saying anything and walked to the base of the stairs. I heard her knock on the bathroom door and say her brother's name. He came downstairs still damp, towel around his shoulders, clearly not expecting a family meeting at 9 in the morning. He looked at Vivienne, then at me, then at my daughter, who had come back to the table but was standing rather than sitting. What followed was 40 minutes I am not going to fully describe, because it was private in a way that still feels private. Even now, Vivienne talked. My son listened. He asked her things. She answered some of them and said she couldn't fully answer others. He asked her directly, was this why she had been at the networking event in Nashville? She said the event had been on her calendar. She said she had noticed him first. She said she didn't know anymore where the line was. He asked her if she had planned to approach me about my finances. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, not yet, but yes, eventually. My son stood up and left the room. He went outside and stood in the backyard for a long time. I watched him through the kitchen window. His hands were in his pockets. He stood very still the way he used to stand as a kid when he was trying not to cry and was succeeding. Vivienne asked me if she should go or stay. I said that was up to him. She stayed until noon. They talked again, the two of them, alone in the living room, with the door mostly closed. I have no idea what was said. When she came out, she had her bag. She shook my hand, which was a strange, formal thing, but I think it was the only thing she could think to do. She nodded at my daughter. She walked to her rental car and drove away. My son stood at the window and watched the car until it turned the corner. We didn't talk much that afternoon. We watched football. I made sandwiches. My daughter did the dishes without being asked. At some point, my son put his arm around my shoulders, the way he used to do when he was too old to lean on me like a kid, but still needed to be close to something solid. I didn't move. I just stood there and let him. Later that week, I called my former colleague and told him what had happened. He said I should file a report with the Indiana Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division, and I did. I sent the forum post, the lawsuit filing, the LLC registration, the complaint from North Carolina. I don't know what came of it. I haven't heard back anything definitive. I'm not sure the system moves fast enough to matter in these cases, or at all, but it felt important to put the information somewhere official, somewhere it could be found by the next family. My son called me 2 weeks later. He said he was okay. He said he appreciated what I had done, even though it had been the worst Sunday morning of his adult life. I said I was sorry it had happened. I meant both the discovery and the fact that it had needed to be discovered. He asked me how I'd known to look. I told him about the signal. He didn't know we had one. He laughed a little, surprised, and then he was quiet for a moment. He said, "She noticed something I missed." I said that's what she's always done. He said, "I know. There is a particular kind of grief in finding out that someone you opened your home to was, at least in part, there to take something from it. It doesn't erase the moments that felt real. It doesn't make the sunflowers retroactively mean nothing. What it does is make you sit with uncertainty for a long time. Because people are not simple, and motivations are not simple. And whatever Vivienne was when she walked into my house, she was probably more than one thing. But I'm a retired history teacher with a pension and a paid-off house and a fireproof box in the closet. And I am telling you, family signals work. Talk to your kids. Make a plan for the moments when something feels wrong, but you can't say it out loud at the dinner table with company over. It does not have to be complicated. It just has to be yours. My daughter and I had a code for 25 years. She used it once. It was enough. I've been sitting with this story for a few months now, and the thing that keeps coming back to me isn't the confrontation or the forum post, or even the moment I watched Vivienne's rental car turn the corner and disappear. What keeps coming back is the sunflowers. She brought sunflowers, and I liked her. That's the part nobody warns you about, that the people who want to take something from you are often genuinely pleasant to be around, at least for a while. Here's what I've come to believe. Actions accumulate, not in a mystical sense, but in a plain, practical one. Vivienne had spent years building a method, refining it, moving from state to state, adjusting the approach each time. That kind of operation doesn't sustain itself without a pattern of choices. Small ones at first, probably, and then larger ones, until the whole structure of a person's working life is built on extracting trust from people who gave it freely. What she set in motion eventually came back to her. Not because the universe keeps score, but because patterns have consequences. The paper trail she left in North Carolina, the lawsuit in South Carolina, the forum post from Georgia, those weren't bad luck. They were the record of 100 decisions compounding over time. My daughter made a different set of decisions. She stayed curious. She asked questions other people might have felt were impolite. She looked at what was in front of her and trusted what she saw, even when it was uncomfortable, even when being wrong would have embarrassed her and strained her relationship with her brother. That took something real, not just intelligence, but the willingness to act on it. A lot of people notice things and talk themselves out of paying attention. She didn't. She pressed her thumb into her palm twice and trusted that I would still remember what it meant after 25 years. And my son, I want to be honest about him because he's the one who paid the steepest price here. He did nothing wrong. He met someone at an event. He felt something genuine. He brought her home to the people who matter most to him. The fact that she may have engineered part of that doesn't erase what he felt or make him foolish for feeling it. What I've watched him do in the months since is harder than finding out the truth. It's rebuilding the willingness to trust again. He's doing it, slowly, that kind of recovery. Deciding to stay open after you've been closed down is its own form of strength, one I don't think gets enough credit. I think about what I would tell someone who asked me what I learned from all of this. I'd tell them it comes down to 3 things, none of them complicated. Do right by the people in your life, especially when no one's watching, because your choices are always building something, and eventually you live inside what you built. Stay sharp enough to recognize when something doesn't add up, and be honest with yourself about what you're seeing instead of seeing what's comfortable. And when things go wrong, and they will, they always do, find the steadiness to keep going without letting the wound become the whole story. My daughter had a code with me for 25 years. She used it once on a Sunday night in November, pressing her thumb silently into her palm, while her brother told a funny story about a delayed flight. It was enough. It's always been enough.